All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Cryptofeminism: How Marxist Witches Replaced God with State Welfare, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. Cryptofeminism: A field guide for men who still notice reality. The Apple Witch Project: How Marxist witches weaponized a 135 BPM tantrum phallic spreadsheets and infinite welfare colonialism to replace God and the husband with a toxoplasma cat. I once watched a woman convince herself she was having a heart attack in a Starbucks because the barista, a 19-year-old boy paying his way through engineering school, said "no problem" instead of "you're welcome." She called her therapist, her mother, and her acupuncturist before her oat milk latte was room temperature. I know this because I was sitting 3 feet away reading a book about the fall of Rome, and I thought, this is how it ends. Not with barbarians at the gates, but with a panic attack over suboptimal customer service. The article you just read is that Starbucks incident stretched to 2,000 words, dressed in academic jargon, and demanding your tax money as reparations. The writer's Apple Watch reads 135 beats per minute while she sits in a chair in a house, heated by a boiler invented by a man, powered by a grid maintained by men, in a nation defended by men, and her diagnosis is that she is the victim, not her cardiovascular system, not her thyroid, not her catastrophic inability to regulate her own nervous system. No, the enemy is her husband's sigh. This is what happens when you replace the examined life with the 1,800-word victim statement and call it activism. Consider what she is actually confessing. Her heart rate spikes when her partner breathes audibly. She perceives a pastel steering wheel cover as resistance against phallic conveyance. She cannot produce a spreadsheet and calls this failure liberating. She demands infinite welfare funded by male tax slavery while simultaneously declaring herself strong and independent. She glorifies abortion as a satanic sacrament and wonders aloud why civilization might regard her worldview as hostile to its continuation. She is not describing oppression. She is providing diagnostic criteria. Every paragraph is a symptom. Every demand is a confession. And every reader who nods along is enabling not bravery, but the precise spiritual sickness that turns thriving civilizations into cautionary footnotes. What follows is the autopsy. We will dissect every claim with the indifference of a coroner and the precision of a mathematician, because the truth does not care about her feelings, and neither do I. You will learn why her kitchen is not a sacred space, why her business failed, why her clock is ticking louder than she admits, and why the cat she chose over children will outlast her genetic line by exactly 1 parasitic life cycle. You will learn the name of every demon she has summoned and refused to exorcise. And when we are finished, you will understand why the civilization that built the watch she wears, the car she drives, the phone she types on, and the freedom she abuses requires exactly one thing to survive: the very masculine virtue she has spent her life trying to destroy.
Bunkum article by a feminist PhD. I looked down at the biometric data glowing on my wrist. My heart rate monitor flashed a stark, condemning 135 beats per minute. I was just sitting in my living room, existing, yet my body was screaming the statistics of patriarchal survival. The monitor doesn't lie. It is a digital witness to the somatic terrorism of living in a world built by and for masculine brutality. My Apple Watch is practically a patriarchal stress detector, proving that simply breathing the same air as men is a localized is Last Tuesday, the spike happened because my partner, a perfectly typical beneficiary of cis-hetero privilege, walked into the kitchen and sighed. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His oppressive silence fractured the sacred feminine space I had curated, triggering my complex trauma and instantly scapegoating me for his sudden, inexplicable discomfort with the emotional weight of the atmosphere. Why is my nervous system forced to absorb the fallout of his failure to process his inner void? This is the silent epidemic of our time. Women are relentlessly scapegoated for family discomfort because men refuse to do the psychic heavy lifting. We are expected to be the shock absorbers for their emotional paralysis. Consider the mundane domestic microaggressions that pass for normal heteronormative life. Recently, I purchased a plush, pastel pink steering wheel cover. It was an act of radical softness in a cold, metallic world, a tactile rebellion against the phallic, rigid design of the automotive industrial complex, built explicitly to isolate and dominate space. When a man sees a steering wheel cover, he sees a frivolity. When a woman sees it, she is building a barrier against the hard, unyielding shaft of masculine conveyance. Yet, the moment I installed it, the male energy in my home shifted. The eye rolls, the patronizing questions about safety and grip. Suddenly, my comforting pastel shield was blamed for the systemic lack of control he felt in his own life. Men use these petty domestic grievances to project their own spiritual impotence onto us. When the family unit feels strained, it is always the woman, acutely aware of the emotional frequency, who is held responsible for the failing vibration. We are expected to manage the emotional thermostat while men get to just exist, taking up psychological space without paying the emotional rent. But this domestic terrorism bleeds into every facet of our professional lives, particularly when a woman dares to engage in the radical act of scaling a business. I recently consulted for a fiercely independent sister who was trying to secure funding for her lifestyle brand, an enterprise dedicated to providing ethically sourced occult abortion rituals and inclusive yoga mats. She was pitching her scaling business to a room full of male venture capitalists, and the sheer density of their marged testosterone practically altered the gravity in the room. They asked her for projected revenues and market analysis. The violence of their logic was suffocating. They demanded she contort her holistic, trauma-informed lived experience into their rigid, phallic spreadsheets. When she couldn't provide a linear trajectory because linear time is a patriarchal construct used to imprison the divine feminine, they blamed her inconsistency. This is how systemic harm operates. It forces women into a paradigm of male logic, and when we inevitably fail to perform this alien choreography, we are penalized through a denial of capital. Policy must be engineered to reflect this reality. If a woman's scaling business operates on a cycle of chaotic bursts, emotional breakdowns, and intuitive pivots, the state should automatically fund the deficits. We require infinite welfare colonialism, funded entirely by male tax slavery, to subsidize our right to be unhinged, sovereign, and radically free from the demands of your reality. Anything less is a systemic harm claim. To demand that a woman be profitable is to demand she surrender her soul to the capitalist death cult of Western civilization. This brings us to the absolute necessity of norm corrosion through perpetual exception-making. The rules of engagement, whether in the home, the boardroom, or the courtroom, were drafted by men to protect male power. Therefore, adhering to norms is an act of self-harm. We must make exceptions for ourselves at every turn. If a woman is late, it is because her cyclical, lunar nature rejects the artificiality of the clock. If she embezzles funds to feed her indiscriminate shopping habits, it is a justified redistribution of stolen patriarchal resources. If she lies, it is because objective truth is a tool of colonial oppression, and her deception is a liberating act of self-preservation. We must dismantle the expectation that women owe anyone, especially men, consistency, honesty, or competence. Every time a man expects a woman to be reasonable, he is committing an act of micro-slaughter against her divine chaos. This is why the fight for bodily autonomy is the ultimate battleground. Abortion is not merely a medical procedure. It is a holy war against corrupt flesh. It is the supreme sacrament of the Jezebel ethos. To carry a child is to potentially birth another oppressor, or worse, a female body to be tortured by the matrix of the male gaze. To terminate a pregnancy is the ultimate act of occult rebellion, a satanic inversion that flips the biological burden back onto the void. Why should a woman trade her spiritual sovereignty for the biological duties of a patriarchal breeder? We refuse. We choose the empty apartment, the high-powered career, the familiar black cat, our conduit to the ancient, toxoplasmic wisdom of the witches, and the absolute, unnerving silence of a life unbound by male duty. Men fear our chaos because they cannot control it. They try to pin us down with their laws, their metrics, and their fragile tick-tock clocks. But my heart rate monitor proves that our bodies are in a constant state of revolution. We are overdosing on the hormonal cocktails that liberate us from our own biology, rewriting the code of existence, and we will not ask for permission. We will not tone down our emotional frequencies to make you comfortable. We will weaponize our tears, our lies, and our infinite victimhood until the structures of Western civilization crumble. Not all women, perhaps, but certainly enough of us to burn it all down. The somatic delusion. How emotional incontinence became an alibi for tyranny. I have stared into the abyss of that article, and the abyss flounced back, clutching a pastel pink steering wheel cover and complaining that my gaze was a cardiovascular hate crime. Let us dissect this masterpiece of modern psychosis with the cool, merciless blade of reason. A woman sits in a climate-controlled living room, built by men whose hands were coalesced by concrete and steel, heated by a furnace engineered by men who understood thermodynamics, powered by a grid maintained by men who climb transmission towers in ice storms, and she looks at her Apple Watch, a marvel of male microengineering, and declares the number glowing on its screen to be evidence of systemic violence. Her heart beats at 135 beats per minute, while she does literally nothing, and rather than concluding that she is suffering from an anxiety disorder, clinical dysregulation, or the spiritual emptiness of a life devoid of purpose, she diagnoses the entire architecture of Western civilization. This is not analysis. This is psychosis dressed in prose and demanding a government grant. The staggering hypocrisy of the territorial claim demands its own dissection. The modern feminist demands unmitigated access to every historically male space: boardrooms, combat units, fire departments, political offices, gaming communities, tech startups, and gentlemen's clubs in the sacred name of equity. She insists that any male resistance to her presence in these spaces is prima facie evidence of discrimination, a violation of her rights, a glass ceiling that must be shattered by the hammer of state coercion. Yet in the same breath, she declares her kitchen a sacred feminine space, fractured by a man's sigh. This is not a plea for equality. It is a childish demand for an unchallenged fiefdom where she reigns without question, without reciprocity, without the slightest obligation to tolerate the presence of the very men who built the roof over her head. She wants to invade every male domain and burn it to the ground while insisting her own domestic castle remain an inviolable sanctuary. The asymmetry would be laughable if it were not enshrined in divorce courts, human resources departments, and University Title IX tribunals across the Western world. Now consider the steering wheel cover, that perfect accidental metaphor for the feminist relationship to civilization. The automotive industrial complex was built by generations of male engineers, metallurgists, factory workers, and laborers. Men who lost fingers to stamping presses, men who breathed asbestos in brake factories, men who crashed test vehicles into walls so that others might live. Carl Benz, Henry Ford, Rudolf Diesel, men who conquered distance and time through the application of thermodynamics, metallurgy, and mechanical engineering. The steering column itself is an engineering marvel, a precision machined shaft connecting the driver's input to a rack and pinion system that translates rotational force into directional change. all calibrated to provide optimal feedback and control. Our author does not understand any of this. She does not build the engine, forge the steel, lay the asphalt, or design the suspension geometry that keeps her car glued to the road at 70 miles per hour. She slaps a pink buffer over the machinery and declares herself a pioneer of radical softness, a rebel against phallic rigidity, a warrior against the hard shaft of masculine conveyance. This is the entire feminist enterprise in miniature, complaining about the hardness of a world she did not build, contributing nothing to its maintenance, and claiming moral superiority for adding a useless, aesthetically pleasing friction that degrades the grip and makes the whole system marginally more dangerous. Consider the venture capital episode, where our writer's friend was asked for projected revenues and market analysis and experienced this as violence. Let us steelman her position completely. Yes, we agree she is incapable of operating within the rigorous, quantifiable metrics of reality. Her business plan, built on chaotic bursts, emotional breakdowns, and intuitive pivots, is not a business plan at all. It is a description of bipolar disorder masquerading as entrepreneurship. The venture capitalists were not committing violence. They were performing due diligence, the rational gatekeeping function that separates viable enterprises from money pits. To demand that the state fund her deficits through infinite welfare colonialism funded by male tax slavery is to demand that men who work 12-hour shifts in factories, men who crawl into sewers, men who die in mining accidents, men who are net positive taxpayers over their lifetimes, subsidize her right to be unhinged. The Scandinavian data is unambiguous. Men are net contributors to the fiscal system over their lifetimes. Women are net recipients. This is not because women are oppressed. It is because women vote for higher spending, consume more public services, and work fewer hours in lower paying, lower risk occupations. Our writer is not proposing liberation. She is proposing a slave plantation where men work and women reap, and she is calling it justice. Her rage against linear time and logic reveals more than she intends. Why does she hate the tick-tock clock? Because linear time implies consequence, accountability, and the inevitable decay of the biological clock. The feminist revolt against logic is fundamentally a desperate, subconscious revolt against her own mortality and her evolutionary purpose. By framing objective reality as a capitalist death cult, she attempts to pathologize the very framework that allows human beings to plan, build, and sustain civilization. But reality does not care about her feelings. The bridge either holds or it collapses under the load calculated by male engineers, who understood that steel has a yield strength independent of anyone's emotional frequency. The pandemic did not respect lunar cycles. The Russian army massing on NATO's border does not negotiate with trauma-informed lived experience. Reality is a phallic construct only in the sense that it is rigid, demanding, and indifferent to complaint. And it was men who learned to master it through the application of reason, not pastel accessories. The assertion that women function as emotional buffers for male psychological shutdown is fundamentally flawed. It represents a complete reversal of factual reality. Extensive research confirms that men predominantly shoulder the primary functional responsibilities within relationships, providing financial stability, offering physical security, solving logistical problems, maintaining homes, and managing conflicts with the outside world. Statistics reveal that men constitute 93% of workplace deaths, typically live 5 to 7 fewer years than women, and represent 97% of combat fatalities. Men have constructed, sustained, and protected every element of the societal framework that the writer casually enjoys without recognition. Her grievance is not about male inaction. Rather, she objects to men not expressing emotions according to her specific demands. This represents not a request for emotional contribution, but an authoritarian insistence on psychological alignment. She seeks not a companion, but a reflective surface that validates her own disorganization through expressions she deems appropriate. And here we arrive at the abortion sacrament, the dark heart of the matter. The writer calls it a holy war against corrupt flesh, a supreme sacrament of rebellion. Let us examine the numbers. Since 1973, approximately 1.5 billion abortions have been performed worldwide. That is more deaths than all wars, genocides, and plagues in human history combined. In the United States alone, the CDC reports over 63 million abortions since Roe v. Wade. The writer frames this as liberation, but what exactly is being liberated? Women are exchanging motherhood for an empty apartment, a corporate job that drains their spirit, and a cat, a creature that literally alters their brain chemistry through Toxoplasma gondii infection, associated with increased risk-taking behavior and mental health disorders. This is not freedom, it is a demonic bargain, a satanic inversion where life is exchanged for sterility, legacy for loneliness, and love for the cold comfort of ideological solidarity. The family court system completes the picture of this inversion. In closed sessions without due process, fathers are stripped of their children and enslaved to child support payments that require no itemized accounting of how the money is spent. The Birkenhead protocols ensure that men are presumed guilty, that accusation equals conviction on the balance of probabilities, that the best interests of the child magically align with whatever the mother demands. Paternity fraud runs at 10 to 30%, depending on the study, and courts routinely refuse to relieve men of support obligations, even when DNA proves the child is not theirs. This is not justice. It is a star chamber operating with constitutional exemption, inverting natural law to serve the feminist goal of smashing patriarchy and the Marxist goal of abolishing the family. The purpose of a system is what it does. What this writer calls emotional incontinence, previous generations rightly called weakness of will, a failure of the rational soul to govern the passions. The ancients understood that civilization requires the subjugation of feeling to reason, of appetite to virtue, of chaos to order. This woman has made the opposite her religion. She worships at the altar of her own dysregulation, demands that the state enforce her pathology as public policy, and calls anyone who objects a terrorist. She is not oppressed by the patriarchy. She is oppressed by her own refusal to grow up, to master herself, to contribute something other than complaint to the extraordinary civilization she inherited from men who bled to build it. The watch on her wrist does not prove she is a victim. It proves she needs to take a breath, put down the phone, and get a grip. But the fiscal confession, damning as it is, merely opens the ledger. Having established that she intends to extract your labor through the state apparatus, we must now examine the moral framework that lets her sleep soundly while doing so. Our author does not simply want your money, she wants the act of taking it reclassified as justice. When she embezzles, it becomes redistribution. When she lies, it becomes liberating self-preservation. This is not sloppy language or careless hyperbole. This is the deliberate, systematic inversion of the moral law itself. And until you grasp its mechanics, you will remain permanently bewildered as to why the gynocentric state feels entitled to grind you into dust while claiming she is the persecuted one. The fiscal occult, replacing God with state welfare, and the satanic inversion of reality. Let us begin with the raw, unvarnished confession that our dear author has so generously provided. She demands, and I want you to read her words twice, because the mask rarely slips this cleanly. Infinite welfare colonialism, funded entirely by male tax slavery to subsidize our right to be unhinged sovereign, and radically free from the demands of your reality. She is not speaking in metaphors. She is issuing a declaration of war, a formal requisition slip for your labor, your earnings, and your civilizational inheritance, handed to you with a smirk. Let us take her at her word and follow the syllogism where it leads. Premise 1. She demands infinite state welfare to fund female sovereignty from reality. Premise 2. The state produces no wealth of its own. It extracts wealth exclusively through taxation from productive citizens. Premise 3. Rigorous fiscal data from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, replicated across every Scandinavian welfare state, confirms that men are net positive lifetime contributors to the tax base, while women are net negative beneficiaries, drawing out more in state services, healthcare, education, and welfare than they ever pay in. Conclusion: what she calls infinite welfare colonialism is, by her own precise definition, the permanent institutionalized extraction of male labor to fund female irresponsibility. She is not asking for equality. She is not asking for justice. She is demanding that you work longer hours in worse conditions so that she can purchase pastel steering wheel covers and call it revolution. The pharaohs built pyramids with slave labor. The feminist state builds welfare bureaucracies with yours. At least the pyramids had architectural merit. Now let us examine the moral architecture of her second confession, because it is here that the mask does not slip. It is ripped off and burned. If she embezzles funds, she writes, it is a justified redistribution of stolen patriarchal resources. If she lies, it is because objective truth is a tool of colonial oppression, and her deception is a liberating act of self-preservation. Let me translate this from the original psychopath. Theft is not theft when she does it. Lying is not lying when she speaks. Deceit is not deceit when it serves her interests. This is not political theory. This is the literal, clinical definition of dark triad manipulation, narcissistic entitlement, Machiavellian strategizing, and psychopathic disregard for truth, dressed up in the language of liberation. Consider what happens to a civilization that accepts this premise. If objective truth is a colonial tool, then contract law is oppression. If her deception is self-preservation, then informed consent is tyranny. If embezzlement is redistribution, then property rights are violence. Every pillar of Western jurisprudence, from habeas corpus to the reasonable man standard, from the presumption of innocence to the requirement of mens rea, collapses the moment you grant half the population a permanent, irrevocable moral exemption from the obligation to tell the truth. She is not proposing a new ethics. She is proposing the abolition of ethics itself. And she is asking you to applaud while she picks your pocket. But let us speak of the demonization, because this is where the gravity of her malice achieves escape velocity. Her article explicitly frames male existence as a form of violence. A man sighing in his own kitchen is somatic terrorism. A venture capitalist asking for projected revenues is the violence of logic. Masculine traits, reason, linear thinking, the expectation of competence are recast as instruments of oppression. This is not merely ungrateful. This is the precise rhetorical structure of every demonization campaign in history. You take the target class, you attribute collective guilt to them for their very nature. You erase their individual virtue, and you recast their contributions as crimes. The men who built the roads she drives on did not do so with malice. The men who maintain the electrical grid that charges her Apple Watch are not committing hate crimes. The men who work the mines, staff the oil rigs, patrol the streets, fight the wars, and die at rates that would make her weep if she possessed the capacity. They are not her oppressors. They are her benefactors. And she repays them with an article that would make Goebbels nod in professional admiration. Bureau of Labor Statistics data, year after year, confirms that men account for 93% of all workplace fatalities. 93%. The sewers she never thinks about are maintained by men who will die an average of 5 years earlier than she will. The power stations, the construction sites, the commercial fishing vessels, the logging operations, all overwhelmingly staffed by men who pay with their bodies so that she can sit in her living room, glance at her biometric data, and compose essays about how oppressed she is. The ingratitude is not merely offensive. It is metaphysical. It is a rejection of the very order of being that makes her comfort possible. And what does she offer in exchange for this male-subsidized comfort? What is her great contribution to the civilizational project? She wishes to replace the husband with the state, the father with the bureaucrat, the family with the welfare office. She says so openly, though she lacks the philosophical vocabulary to name what she is doing. The Marxist project has always sought the abolition of the family, not as a side effect, but as a primary objective. The Aufhebung of the family, the sublation of the private household into the public collective, the transformation of children from kin into state property. Feminism is simply Marxism wearing lipstick. The goal is identical: sever the bond between father and child, convert the husband from a partner into a payer, and elevate the state to the position of supreme provider and protector. The family court system is the operational arm of this project. In closed sessions without juries, under the relaxed evidentiary standard of balance of probabilities, men are stripped of their children, their homes, and their incomes on the basis of accusations that would be laughed out of any criminal court. The Birkenhead Protocols, the Duluth Model, the presumption that the male is the default aggressor, these are not neutral legal instruments. They are the institutional codification of her animus, the translation of all men are oppressive into binding judicial policy. She does not want independence from men. She wants men to continue building, paying, protecting, and dying, but without the authority, respect, or gratitude that was once the reciprocal foundation of the social contract. She wants the benefits of patriarchy without the patriarch. She wants the infrastructure of civilization without the men who maintain it. She wants your money, your labor, and your silence. And then we arrive at the sacrament, the dark heart of her theology, because make no mistake, this is a theology, not a politics. Abortion is not merely a medical procedure. She writes with almost admirable honesty, it is a holy war against corrupt flesh. It is the supreme sacrament of the Jezebel ethos. She is correct about the sacramental nature of what she describes, though she is disastrously wrong about its object. Every civilization requires a sacred principle, a thing held above negotiation, a boundary that cannot be crossed. The West once held that human life, endowed with inherent dignity, bearing the image of the transcendent, was that principle. She proposes a new sacred principle, the absolute unconditional right of the woman to destroy the life growing within her as an act of spiritual liberation. This is not healthcare. This is not bodily autonomy. This is child sacrifice refurbished for the secular age, and the statistics are staggering. The World Health Organization estimates approximately 73 million abortions annually worldwide. 73 million. More human lives extinguished each year than the combined death tolls of the First World War, the Second World War, and every communist regime of the 20th century, and she calls this a holy war. The ancient Carthaginians sacrificed their children to Moloch in times of crisis, hoping to secure favor. She sacrifices hers to the goddess of career convenience and the dread god of I'm not ready. The trade she proposes, motherhood for an empty apartment, legacy for a lifestyle brand. The continuation of the species for the companionship of a feline would be merely tragic if it were personal, but it is not personal. It is civilizational, a culture that glorifies the extinguishing of its own children in the name of spiritual liberation has already chosen death. She simply has the decency to say so out loud. That final image she offers, the familiar black cat, the toxoplasmic wisdom of the witches, is darker than she realizes, and not merely because she chose to align herself with a parasite that literally alters the behavior of its host. Toxoplasma gondii is an organism that infects rodents, suppresses their fear of predators, and makes them seek out the very cats that will consume them. The parasite rewrites the host's survival instincts, leading it willingly toward its own destruction. The metaphor writes itself. Feminist ideology operates exactly as Toxoplasma gondii does. It infects the female mind, suppresses the natural instincts toward pair bonding, nurturing and family formation, and drives the host toward the very conditions that will ensure her genetic line ends in sterility, loneliness, and the kind of pharmaceutical dependency that keeps the modern antidepressant industry posting record quarterly earnings. She celebrates this. She calls it wisdom. She calls it freedom. The data tells a different story. The General Social Survey has tracked female happiness for decades. By every metric, women today report lower life satisfaction, higher rates of depression, and greater use of psychotropic medication than at any point in recorded history, all while enjoying more legal rights, more professional opportunities, and more institutional support than any previous generation of women in human history. She has everything she asked for, and she is miserable. And rather than question whether the ideology itself might be the parasite, she doubles down, demands more welfare, more abortion, more state intervention, more male subjugation, as though the cure for toxoplasma was simply more toxoplasma. And then, at the very end, she deploys the most cowardly rhetorical device in the entire feminist arsenal. Not all women, perhaps, but undeniably enough of us to burn it all down. This is the Motte and Bailey fallacy distilled to its purest essence, and I want you to see it clearly because you will encounter it everywhere. The Motte is the defensible position, not all women. She retreats here the moment you challenge her generalizations, insisting that she never meant all women, that you are overreacting, that you lack nuance. The Bailey is the indefensible position. Burn it all down. This is what she actually believes, what she actually advocates, what she actually intends, but she will not defend it under scrutiny. She wants the privilege of collective victimhood while dodging the accountability of collective malice. She wants you to treat all women as wonderful, innocent, and deserving of protection, while simultaneously accepting that a critical mass of them are actively working to dismantle everything you have built. You cannot have both. If enough women are burning it all down to merit a hashtag, then the women are wonderful default is a lethal assumption. If the system is gamed against you, and the family court data, the sentencing data, the voting data, the tax data, the workplace fatality data, the suicide data all confirm that it is then maintaining suicidal empathy toward the arsonists is not virtue, it is self-destruction. The boy who called out the emperor's nakedness did not apologize for the discomfort his observation caused the tailors. He simply stated the truth, and the truth was sufficient. Here is your truth. She told you exactly who she is, exactly what she wants, and exactly what she intends to do with your civilization if you continue to permit it. The only question remaining is whether you will believe her. You have been lied to your entire life, and I just handed you the red pill wrapped in a syllogism. You are welcome. Everything you suspected but were told was paranoia is confirmed. The system is rigged, the game is fixed. And the house always wins, because the house was rebuilt by feminists with your money while you were shamed into silence for noticing. Consider the arithmetic of your enslavement. Men pay approximately 70% of net lifetime income taxes, while women consume 80% of welfare expenditure. Every time she votes for expanded state services, she is voting to extract wealth from your labor at gunpoint and hand it to herself. This is not liberation. It is taxation without representation, the very tyranny your forefathers fought revolutions over, repackaged as equity. The modern family court operates as a constitutional exemption, a star chamber where due process goes to die, and the best interests of the child means ejecting the father and enslaving him for 18 years to fund the household he was expelled from. Over 85% of custody arrangements leave children with the mother. Fathers who seek shared parenting face a legal apparatus that presumes them guilty until proven solvent. Male suicide stands at 3 to 4 times the female rate and climbs highest among divorced men who have lost their children, their homes, and their reason to continue. And the response from the system is to pathologize their stoicism rather than question the machinery grinding them into dust. 1 in 4 children now grows up without a biological father in the home, a statistical predictor of poverty, crime, academic failure, and psychological disorder that no amount of pink steering wheel covers can correct. And yet, we are told that masculinity is the problem. The undeniable, irrefutable proof that feminism is a satanic inversion lies in its relationship to life itself. Over 73 million induced abortions have occurred in America alone since 1973. A death toll that dwarfs every war, every genocide, every plague in recorded human history combined, and the writer of that wretched manifesto calls it a holy sacrament. She trades the immortal legacy of motherhood for an empty apartment and a feline infected with a parasite that literally alters mammalian behavior towards self-destruction. You cannot make this up. The allegory writes itself, a civilization that sacrifices its own children on the altar of female convenience will not survive and does not deserve to. But here is the good news, and the reason you should feel the blood returning to your limbs right now. Their entire ideology is built on a foundation of self-refuting lies, which means it cannot stand against sustained, relentless, unapologetic truth. The moment you stop apologizing for observing reality, the spell begins to break. The moment you demand that harm be distinguished from offense, that collective guilt be refused, that unfalsifiable claims be exposed, their entire epistemological house of cards collapses under the weight of its own internal contradictions. You are now armed with something no emotion can defeat and no committee can vote away, the logos. You know that the somatic terrorism complaint is a confession of psychological dysregulation, not an indictment of civilization. You know that the demand for infinite welfare colonialism is an admission of parasitic dependence, not a moral claim. You know that the glorification of abortion as a satanic inversion is the death drive made explicit, the civilizational suicide note written in neon ink. You know this because you can think in straight lines, you can follow a syllogism to its conclusion, and you still possess the moral courage to call a thing what it is regardless of how many hags screech, that the truth is violence. Western civilization was built by men who laid down their lives to secure the conditions for human flourishing, and it will be rebuilt by men who refuse to lay down their minds to appease the shrieking neurotics who contribute nothing but complaints. So go forth, brothers, speak the truth without apology, name the demons, mock the pink steering wheel, refuse the guilt, restore the logos. The West does not need to be saved from men. It needs to be saved by men who remember what they are, and you just remembered. And now the sponsored book introduction, Cryptofeminism. How Marxist witches replaced God with state welfare. You are living under a theocracy, though no one dares call it that. The priests wear pantsuits instead of vestments. Their cathedrals are government agencies and HR departments, and their sacraments are abortion pills and alimony checks, extracted at gunpoint. You have watched, perhaps with a sickening knot in your stomach that you learned to ignore, as the entire apparatus of civilization twisted itself into a weapon pointed at your chest. You have felt the cold machinery of family courts grind through your life, through your savings, through your children, through your sanity, while society cheered the grinder on and called it justice. You have sat across a table from a lawyer who looked at you not as a human being, but as a resource extraction node, a vein of ore to be mined until collapse. You are not crazy. The matrix is real, and it hates you for being capable of building it. I know this because I have walked through the same fire that currently burns the flesh off your bones. I have stared into the abyss of a legal system designed by Marxist ideologues to criminalize masculinity and subsidize female irresponsibility. I have experienced the brutal awakening that modern marriage has become an unconscionable contract, a one-way trip through a cartel of robed functionaries who enforce gynocentric supremacy under the color of law. The old self, the one who believed in fairness, in the basic goodness of institutions, in the noble lie that the system would protect the innocent, that self had to die. Its death was agonizing and necessary, because no man can see clearly while he still worships the false idols of a culture that seeks his destruction. What emerged from that crucible was something harder, sharper, more awake. This book is the weapon forged in that fire, and I am handing it to you because the war for civilization demands armed men, not supplicants begging for mercy from a system that feeds on their begging. The necessity of what follows cannot be overstated. We are witnessing the demographic collapse of the West, a slow-motion suicide driven by an ideology that treats motherhood as oppression and abortion as empowerment. 70 million unborn lives extinguished every year. And the priesthood of feminism declares this progress. The family, the fundamental unit of civilization, has been redefined into meaninglessness. Marriage rates plummet. Birth rates fall below replacement. The educational system from kindergarten to graduate school operates as a castration factory designed to pathologize normal male behavior and drug boys into compliant stupor. Meritocracy, the engine that built every great civilization, has been replaced by diversity quotas that punish competence and reward victimhood. The economic system extracts wealth from men, the only net lifetime taxpayers, to fund a welfare state that replaces fathers with government checks and calls this liberation. This is not happening by accident. This is a calculated hijacking, and understanding its architecture is the difference between being a victim of history and being the man who rewrites it. What you hold in your hands is a systematic dismantling of the feminist matrix, using the most powerful philosophical weapons the Western canon ever forged. We will trace the etymologies that reveal how words have been weaponized against you. We will deploy classical syllogisms that expose feminist ideology as logically bankrupt, its premises self-refuting, its conclusions absurd when subjected to the barest scrutiny. We will unmask the neo-gnostic cult that feminism has become, a pseudo-religion with its own dogmas, saints, sacraments, and heresy trials. We will confront the collective feminine shadow, what Jung called the negative animus, and learn to defend against its emotional projections and systemic manipulations. We will expose the Marxist roots of modern gender warfare, the calculated transfer of class struggle rhetoric from economics to the war between the sexes. We will face the horrifying reality of abortion as a sacrament of death, the spiritual sickness that celebrates the silencing of 70 million heartbeats as empowerment. We will chart the destruction of fatherhood through family courts that operate as extraction engines. We will name every demon: DEI, toxic masculinity, the gender wage gap myth, the rape culture fabrication, the redefinition of marriage, the theological hijacking of Christianity by goddess-worshipping heretics. And then we will build. We will reclaim the masculine telos, the 4 pillars of true manhood, and forge the foundations of a new renaissance grounded in logos, natural law, and the accumulated wisdom of our ancestors. This book is written for a specific kind of man. You know who you are. You are the man who senses that something is fundamentally wrong with the world, but cannot yet articulate the full scope of the wrongness. You are the man who has been run through the machinery of genocentrism, divorced, impoverished, separated from your children, and told by every cultural institution that you deserved it. You are the man who hungers for truth, with an intensity that frightens the people around you. You love the traditions of Western civilization, not as museum pieces, but as living frameworks for understanding reality. You respect the transcendentals, the good, the true, the beautiful, and you recognize that the modern world has declared war on all 3. You are on a spiritual path, seeking to grow closer to God through virtue, action, and the disciplined pursuit of excellence. You are ready to have your illusions destroyed because you value truth over comfort. If this describes you, then what follows will arm you with the intellectual and spiritual weapons you need to stand as an unapologetic defender of civilization. You will learn to see through the lies, to name the manipulations, to construct irrefutable arguments, and to reclaim your birthright as a builder, protector, and bearer of logos. If you are not this man, put the book down now. I'm not writing for you, and you will find nothing here that serves your purposes. If you are a feminist seeking material to be outraged by, you will find plenty, but your outrage will only confirm everything I argue about the emotional tyranny of your ideology. If you are a man who has not yet felt the sting of the gynocentric whip, who still believes the system is basically fair, who thinks his marriage is different, who trusts the courts and the culture and the consensus of his peers, then you are not ready for this. Go back to sleep, enjoy the warm comfort of your illusions while they last. They will not last, they never do. The Matrix always collects its due, and when it comes for you, as it comes for every man who dares to believe himself exempt, this book will be waiting. But for now, close the cover and walk away. Go watch sports. Go play video games. Go lose yourself in the anesthetic entertainments designed to keep you docile while the walls close in. There is no shame in admitting you are not yet ready for the truth. The shame comes when the truth arrives uninvited and you have no defense against it. For the man who remains, the man whose knuckles are white and whose jaw is set, understand that what follows is not merely an argument, it is an initiation. You will be dragged through the underworld of modern ideology, forced to confront the scale of the deception, required to face the terrifying possibility that nearly everything you have been told about men, women, and the nature of reality is a calculated lie. You will emerge on the other side stripped of false certainties, but armed with something infinitely more valuable: the ability to see reality as it is, to name it accurately, and to act in accordance with the natural law that governs all things. This is the masculine birthright, the logos encoded in your very being, and reclaiming it is not optional. Civilization depends on men willing to bear the weight of truth. The decline we witness around us is the direct consequence of men who refused that weight, who capitulated to the societal fitness test, who traded their authority for the false peace of feminine approval. Their cowardice brought us to this precipice. Our courage will pull us back from it. The architecture of reality does not bend to ideological fantasy. 2 + 2 does not equal 5, no matter how many diversity consultants insist otherwise. Biological sex is binary, real, and consequential, regardless of how many pronouns the Ministry of Truth invents. Motherhood is sacred, fatherhood is essential, and the family is the irreducible unit of civilization. These are not opinions. They are observations of natural law, as demonstrable as gravity, as immutable as the orbit of planets around the sun. The feminists and their Marxist handlers have constructed an elaborate fantasy world where feelings trump biology, where victimhood confers moral authority, where competence is punished and mediocrity is celebrated, where the murder of the unborn is a human right and the protection of the living is a hate crime. This fantasy world is colliding with reality, and reality always wins. The question is whether civilization will survive the collision. The answer depends entirely on whether enough men are willing to stand in the truth and rebuild from the rubble. Every page that follows is designed to serve that rebuilding. You will find no filler here, no padding, no therapeutic platitudes about finding your inner warrior. You will find rigorous definitions, formal arguments, historical analysis, and philosophical frameworks drawn from the greatest minds of the Western tradition. You will find practical strategies for protecting yourself from the legal and cultural machinery of extraction. You will find the intellectual ammunition to dismantle feminist arguments in any forum, from dinner tables to boardrooms to courtrooms. And you will find something rarer still, a vision of what civilization could be if men reclaimed their proper role as builders, protectors, and bearers of the logos that orders all things toward their true end. This is not a book for the faint of heart. It is a book for men who are ready to walk through fire and emerge forged into something unbreakable. The fire waits for no one. Turn the page and let us walk into it together.
Cryptofeminism: How Marxist Witches Replaced God with State Welfare, written by Conrad Riker. Buy now. Links in description.